It's all good.
Siemantel.
There you go.
And we are live. Guys, I am so excited about this. Welcome to the Let's Talk Fishing podcast. My name is James. I'm going to be your podcaster for this evening. Man, I have Mr. Big Bass himself. He's sitting right here, live from California, the Big Bass state. Bill Siemantel. Bill Siemantel, Mr. Big Bass Bill, whatever you want to call it. This man knows how to catch big bass. How are you doing tonight, Bill?
I am doing great, Jay. How about you, man?
I'm doing great. I'm doing great. It's so good to have you on, man, Bill. So people call you Mr. Big Bass Bill. You run the Big Bass Zone. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your history with catching monsters?
Well, I was really fortunate growing up here in California. We have impoundments that are super clear water. They plant trout. They create the Pavlov's dog situation where these trouts, they start planting trout in like mid-October. And this is years back. A lot of things have changed. But I was just fortunate that my dad was able to take me out fishing a lot. And then I was the crazy kid that he'd drop me off before his work, or I'd get a float tube or a blow-up boat. And I started doing a lot of I'm teaching myself, watching the fish and learning what's going on, especially with the big bass. And I've been very fortunate that I've caught a ton of big fish in our local lakes and across the country. Everywhere I go, I've been able to take the same techniques of the theories of throwing big baits, big swim baits and stuff, fishing funnels, shadow concepts, and catching monsters. So yeah, I've caught a handful of big fish. Biggest is about 19.75. It's just shy under 20 pounds. Oh my gosh, I said that and you had an earthquake over at your place. We've done really well out here, and I was fortunate enough to get around some guys that start building and designing lures in about 1985. Big wood plugs.
Okay, we seem to be having some technical difficulties here.
Okay.
I'm sitting right now. There we go. Oh, I think you're back.
Okay. Hopefully I've been here the whole time.
You were talking about shadow. Ha.
So where do you want me to go there?
Okay,
Jay?
can you were talking about your history with big bass?
Yeah. Just like I said, I was very fortunate in the clear waters of California to learn a lot from bass. And the concept was I grew up hunting and fishing. And I hated the concept of everybody saying they hunt for big fish. When you finally really understand fish and you get in their own environment, it's looking through the eyes of the fish. It's being able to see how fish respond to certain baits, food, forage, how they push them into shadows, how they push them into funnels to make great opportunities for them to eat. And once you're able to kind of rethink and re-look through the fish's eyes on how they eat their prey, then it's a lot easier for anglers to mimic that and take an illusion and create as much realism as possible. So yeah, I've been very fortunate fishing California.
You think it made a big difference that California has such clear water so that you could actually see the fish? I mean, even prior to the great electronics that we have now.
Oh, 100%. Even the electronics today, the forward-facing sonars, I know there's a lot of stuff that you can see and get from that concept, but nothing, it's like sight fishing. Nothing compares to actually visually seeing a fish. I was fortunate enough to fish with Mike Jones. He's a senior editor for Bassmasters for years. We wrote a book together, The Big Bass Zone. And when I got him in the boat, he called BS on me when we first met. He's like, I've heard about all the big bait fishermen and big bass fishermen in California. And I said, well, let me show you. And we went out there and I showed him, he caught his first big fish figure eighting against a boat years ago, something that you'd only do for muskie fishing. And I showed him. What's that?
I have figure eighted hundreds and hundreds of times, but that's for muskies with, big old things that are made from the back in the 70s, those lures are made from the end of broom handles.
we were making our first swim baits out of broom handles here in 1985. You know, the big trout wooden jointed baits.
Yeah.
But the thing is, seeing this in the water, I grew up crawdad fishing. I grew up soft plastics, artificial, live bait, water, all the stuff back in the day. And when you're able to see a fish and their mood change and them tighten up and actually watch the color of a fish change because their scales will articulate on their back when they get angry or get ready to eat, and they'll actually change colors. So seeing this for so many years in clear water and understanding when a fish goes down on a crawdad, you're not moving the fish towards the crawdad. The fish is actually pushing your crawdad, your jig, into an ambush area. And then when I started seeing 10-pound fish pop a crawdad to watch their claws fall off, and once their claws fall off, then they come over and eat the crawdad and swim away. There's just so much valuable information being able to visually see everything in clear water, then being able to take that knowledge and go into stained and dirty water. It makes it that much easier. The fish never change on how they eat, clear water or dirty water, but understanding how they do it in clear water gives you a better impression on boat positioning, how you stand on a shoreline, how you angle your kayak, and being able to throw and fish from like a deep water situation uphill. So a fish has the capability of pushing a bait into an area that funnels down, that the bottom and the top compresses together or the sides press together. And then at the right moment, doing a directional change and triggering these fish to eat. There's a lot of the illusion realism aspect that crosses all fish styles, all fish techniques, all fish in general. It's not just bass. And then when you understand that, then you could use your tools better, and you put yourself in a position to catch more and bigger fish.
Wow. And you are actually working with Fish Lab now, and you're developing some new lures, aren't you?
Yeah, I've been fortunate. I've been around the industry for a very long time. I've built for other
Oh man,
companies.
there must be a lag. I do apologize.
I hear you good on this side, so I don't know about on your end. So I'm going to keep talking. Hopefully it keeps going through. But yeah, I've been very fortunate.
Yeah, let's talk about your.
Okay. Yeah, I've been fishing for a long time. I've been working for a lot of companies, and I've been very fortunate to hook up with the Kuma, Fish Lab, and Soft Still about 3 years ago. And the guys over at Fish Lab, Mike Bennett, myself, John Bretza, Daniel, Mark Rogers, all these guys are hardcore California anglers that know how to catch fish multi-species. And I was able to come into the family, and we sat down and started looking at some designs that I've had for many years. And we have, like this year, we're coming out with the new color of the Fish Lab BBZ Bio Gizzard Shad. And you got to look at these baits. The cool thing about Fish Lab, you're looking at less than $20, about $20 for the 6-inch, but we're doing swim
$20
bait.
for that?
Yeah, we're knocking stuff out of the park. We're going high detail. Here's a secret that nobody's seen yet. We're actually the flutter nymph that we came out with a year and a half ago. We got them down to 2.5 inches now. So if you're talking about panfish and ultralight for big smallmouth, redfish, snook, we got smaller flutter nymphs coming. This year was awesome, Jay. We came out with the spinner baits and the buzz baits, and we are whacking fish on them. So it's really, really awesome to work with a company that gives us free range on ideas and concepts. And then once we hit that, we got to build it. And then we don't come out with anything on the market unless we hit a good price point that the anglers can actually buy the product and fish with. And that's the cool stuff. So, and then the detail, like I said, when you start talking about detail, we're able to really put serious detail in baits and take illusion to realism with Fish Lab.
Right.
So yeah, so big pike, big muskie, redfish, largemouth bass. Yep. And one last thing for Fish Lab, we're not slowing down. Mike and I and the team have some serious stuff, and I can't show the whole thing, but we do have some new baits coming that are incredible, that should be game changers. And I hate to say that word, but they're going to be game changers for price point and how they work within the water column. That's going to catch fish. We're talking that mimics the small mullet to a small salmon, trout salmon to a threadfin shad, and it's going to put fish in the boat. So yeah, I'm really, really happy that we're able to take our knowledge in fishing and have a company now that we could actually build the right lures for anglers, for you guys back east, to everybody here on the West Coast, up in Canada, down to, New Mexico. So yeah, we're pretty happy, and I'm pretty excited to work with a company like that. You got a leg still? Jay has gone down. Let's see if are you still there, Jay?
Man, that is awesome. That is awesome. Boy, I tell you, I just love those lures that you showed me, though. That's a 6-inch multi-segmented articulating swim bait for $20.
Yeah. We have
fishlabtackle.com, folks. It's right there at the top of the screen.
Yeah, they can get right on Fish Lab. They could look at the product that we have, order it right there, or go to guys over there, like even at iBass 360. A lot of big retailers now have the product there on their shelves. And the cool thing is, you could always reach out to Fish Lab Tackle, and if you're looking for certain product and stuff, make sure you guys tell us, because our team will sit down and start working on product for the anglers. If you need certain things, in certain areas to catch fish, that's what we're here for. And we'll put a little twist on it, but definitely we'll get the price points that it's going to be comparable to everything else out on the market. Quality baits for an unbelievable, reasonable price.
That's unheard of in this day and age.
Yeah.
Some of that stuff costs $80.
There are swim baits out there, gizzard shads, that go for $80, and you're looking at 20-something bucks for a year.
Look at that thing.
Oh yeah.
Man, if you threw that thing through a school of salmon, when the shad ball up in the cold weather, and you can just see the bass pushing them up to the surface, and they start you threw that into one of those explosions like that, who knows what you're going to catch. Hybrid stripers down here are right in with the bass, and they're all in there eating. It's incredible. That thing would be so much fun to throw. Usually when I bring out a big bait like that, people, oh man, what are you doing? You want to catch one fish today? Yeah, if he's 5 pound plus, you're right. Yes, I want to catch one fish today, but I want him to be 24 inches long.
Right. And that's what we did down here. And what I did when I started fishing tournaments back in the day in the 90s, I was really doing a lot of research and doing stuff with big baits, understanding boat positioning, funnels, daisy chain, directional change. And in doing that, I started fishing a lot of tournaments solo. I would go up against team guys, and I'd fish by myself, and I'm throwing 12-inch swim baits and big tubes, and I'm doing stuff because I wanted to continue my learning in a competitive atmosphere. And I've done really well. I've won a lot of big tournaments. I've won, I can't tell you how many big fish awards I've won. I think I'm at 6 boats I've won. I've won trucks, and a lot of those competitions, Bassmasters, everything else, it all comes for understanding the power of baits, no matter if they're 2.5 inches long or you're looking at an 8 to 10-inch bait. The tool, you have to understand what the tool is capable of fishing within the water column, the technique that you're trying to approach, but really understanding getting the right baits that mimic. Like if you're going and you're fishing a place with gizzard shad and stuff, that you have a bait that's so realistic that you take that illusion factor out. And it comes down to the angler is putting that thing in the right place where the fish want to play with it. And they want to push it up against the surface or shadows, up against the rocks, toolies, laydowns, and boat position and angle. Man, that is such a major key on consistently catching bigger fish. So always remember that.
Wow. I never really thought about that, and I've been fishing all my life.
Yeah, I know a good friend of mine. I always bring him up, George Kramer and Mike Jones, Spence Petros, back there where you guys were at. I've been very fortunate. Steve Panaz.
Yeah.
Yeah, yep. Spence, I did the big tiger tube with Spence back in the 90s. Al Linder, I've been fortunate enough to fish with Al and Roland Martin. And it's really cool when you go out there and, we're fishing and then we start talking theories and stuff. And the funniest thing I told George Kramer, this is, 20 years ago, we were fishing up at Folsom. And I said, do you know how many fish eat shadows? And he goes, what are you talking about? And I said, your lure, you bird hunt probably back here, you duck hunt, and you sit down in a blind, and early morning you're sitting there, and all you see the shadows of the duck go across the water, and you're no more than a predator than a largemouth bass is. And instinct, you're sitting there and you go, I see a shadow, and you go, where's the sun? You look for the sun, you go up, and then you find the bird, and then you make your shot. Well, those shadows are no different than what we're doing with swim baits for bass. You could push this bait towards the surface, but when the sun hits it, it'll create a shadow, and you'll see the action of that bait on the bottom of the lake or on a bush down 20 foot. And if you could understand how to position your bait so it creates multiple shadows in the water column, I could fish this bait on the surface, 10 feet down on top of a tree, or 20 feet down on the bottom of the ground where bass is sitting there with the hat on and they're only looking on the ground. They'll actually see the shadow. And I've had bass come out and eat the shadow of the bait and then look for the real bait and come up and eat it. So we were fishing one time with George and we were throwing top water, and it's towards the evening and the sun was over on the far right. And I go, George, check this out. And he's doing a topwater bait, and he was bringing it against a bluff wall of a rock. And the sun angle, because it was low sun angle, it was putting the shadow on the rock, and you could see the shadow of the spook kicking back and forth on the rock. And I'm showing him this, and a spotted bass came up and ate the shadow against the rock. We watched it, and then it turned around and ate his bait. And he just sat there and looked at me. He goes, Bill, I've been doing this my whole life, and nobody's ever mentioned this stuff. And then I just seen it happen. And he goes, I've been fishing forever. And I go, yeah, people can't. A lot of us anglers are one-dimensional. They only see one thing. And in fishing, it's a three-dimensional world. And for every action, there's a positive and or equal reaction. So knowing your shadows, how high you are, how tall you are, you could sundial yourself, Jay.
Yeah.
If you're in the boat and the sun's over here, you have long shadows. As the sun comes up over your head, you have short shadows. Well, if you're fishing 20 foot of water, semi-clear water, light penetration, when the light goes through the water and hits the bottom of the lake, it refracts. It gets more brighter at the bottom because you have double candle power of the light. But you'll have compression of shadows. So if I'm fishing 20 and there's a 26 foot drop and I'm 6 foot tall, I could tell where the sun is just on the top of the boat, just looking at my shadow myself. I'm sundialing myself. If the sun's like this and I'm only throwing this much of a shadow from the tip of my head to my foot, from 20 to 26 foot on the bluff wall down below me, the shadow's only this big. So my boat angle, I have to fish that line. If the sun's at this angle, the shadow could be 3 foot, and I have more room to fish that area because those fish are going to be within the shadow. So there's so many multiple layers in fishing, from grass fishing, rock, depth, river, flats, that the more you get into it, it just opens up the world. And when you see it, everything changes. I've done it to so many guys. They've been fishing 50 years, and I show them something. I go, watch that bait on the surface, and I look down there 20 foot, and they see the shadow, and all of a sudden they see big dirt piles. They could see the fish eating the shadows. And I go, now keep bringing that up into the funnel, and you watch the fish come up and grab that bait right before it gets to the rock. And it's, like I said, it's really cool. I really enjoy learning. And the more I fish, the more I don't know nothing, Jay. Every time I think I am honest, there's more stuff to learn. So
I've said that a lot of times. Every time I think I know something about fishing, the fish teach me differently.
Right.
And what you do is what do you do about that? Well, you just keep going.
Right. But if you're a good student, every time you see something, the fish tell you something, the teachers tell you something, good students will try to reproduce it and try to do it multiple times to eliminate the fluke factor of it just happened. Or when you threw that bait out and it hit the water instantaneously, and you're like, going, was that fish was sitting there just with his mouth open? Or when you threw that bait, did the shadow of that bait go across the surface like a duck did, and that fish followed that shadow until it hit the water and ate it? And I've watched fish go 20, 30 yards chasing my shadow in the air, and right when it hits the water, the fish is on. So the more you can keep your eyes open and look at things different, man, you're going to see some really cool stuff.
You just gave me an idea. That's why I have seen guys. I've seen a lot of guys on the Bassmasters skip in open water. And I'm like, why are they skipping in open water? Well, you just gave me that answer.
There's reasons. Every time you skip on open water, you'll leave in little rings. Depending on the sun, those rings are going to multiply underwater that look like little bait fish splattering. And the fish can watch that. There's a lot of, it's even like fly fishing. Guys don't understand, when you're fly fishing, I grew up doing all kinds of fishing. But when you go uphill with a fly in a current and you mend your line, the biggest thing while you mend your line or you use fluorocarbon and stuff is when a trout is sitting in the current or a big smallmouth, if the shadow of the line crosses the eyes of the fish first, they're out of there. If the shadow of the fly comes on the bottom, you'll see the trout go down on the ground, look at the shadow of the fly, and then they come up and they eat the fly. So even mending your line so the shadow of the bait precedes the shadow of something negative in a fish's eyes will increase your fish catching capability. So it doesn't matter if you're trout fishing, you're striper fishing, you're largemouth bass fishing. Every action, there's a reaction, and understanding shadows will put you in a position that a lot of people will never, ever figure out.
Wow. See, I never thought about all this. And I have fished obsessively since the 70s. I didn't do a whole lot of sports. I don't watch football.
Same here.
I simply fish, and that's why I love doing this show. It's taught me how much more I need to learn and how little time I have to learn it. And the one thing I do know about fishing is you absolutely will not catch a fish sitting on your couch.
No. You could be a computer troll and say you catch all this fish, but the guys that are out there putting time on the water, that's the big thing. And you're fortunate enough. I know you just said you picked up the book that Jones and I wrote, The Big Bass Zone, and you're getting ready to start to read it. There's a lot of great information. I left a lot. I mean, we just couldn't do a book that had 10,000 pages in it, but the concept of finesse, it doesn't matter if it's a 12-inch bait or a 2-inch bait. Finesse is how you work your tools within the water column. So I can catch just as big as fish. I've caught fish to 18 pounds on little crappie jigs, and I've caught 18 pounders on big swim baits. And techniques are always the best key in understanding water column. So there's some terminologies I think that anglers need to kind of relax on and open up their thoughts. But yeah.
Okay, we have a question and a comment from Brad Yole from Bassin Magazine.
Brad
It
Yule.
says, it says what does Peter Pan do?
He fights with his shadows. Yeah.
See,
And when
exactly.
you,
And also, Brad said, "Fantastic read for your book."
that's awesome. No, Brad and I go way, way back, back in, I think, 96 or something when I was fishing the Big Bass World Championship. And good guy, knows a lot of stuff about the industry. I think he's still doing, no, I know he's still doing the Bassin magazine. So, yeah, just great content, great information. And like I said, that's what you need. You need, podcasts like this with you, Jay. You need Brad, you need Bassmasters, you need Bag Magazine. You need everybody to come in and give good, honest feedback on learning. And I think that's where the industry may be lacking in some things. I know I was told years ago by George Kramer. He goes, Bill, why don't you ever tell anybody what you're doing? This is before we wrote the book. And I go, well, I put a lot of time and effort into studying to try to really be a student of the game. And I know that's an overplayed word, but I said, I am. And he looked at me and he said, well, what happens if you learn all this information and you die? Who do you really help?
Oh,
And
oh,
he threw that at me. And that was the one reason, because I did stuff. I never did it locally because I didn't want to be one of those guys that like, oh, Bill's always in Western Bass Outdoor News or he's always here. I just wanted to go catch fish and learn. And I was very competitive. But I did give information to Spence Petros, Steve Panaz, Kurt Beckstrom, John Storm, the guys at North American Fishermen. We had the in fishermen
no.
guys, Doug and everybody, like, yeah, and with, especially Al Linder. I was fortunate enough to fish with Troy Linder for 4 or 5 years, and we won multiple boats together. We dominated the fishing industry on the West Coast. But George hit me with that sledgehammer. He says, you're gonna die, and no one's gonna
Yeah.
figure out this next level. And so we sat down, me and Mike Jones, and we wrote a book. Now, I'm not gonna lie to anybody. I have techniques that I know that are unbelievable, and understanding stuff. I'll just give like suspended animation. If you understand suspended animation and what it does within the water column for big fish or fish in general, man, when you find those opportunities, you're the only guy out there doing it. It doesn't matter if you're fishing against 500 people. We did it up at the Bass Cat Invitational in 2000. Me and my partner Tim Grenels years ago, we won a boat up there out of 800 teams. We were the furthest ones come to a lake
Jeez.
we've never seen before, and we walked away with a new Bass Cat. And when you understand suspended animation and you could look at 3-dimensional and then understand that fish see 3-dimensional, here's something to think about. Why is float and fly, which I grew up in, and I've caught multiple big fish. I don't know how many fish over 10 pounds I've caught on a float and fly and won tournaments and everything else. It's the suspended animation, being able to hover a bait underneath the bobber at a set depth at certain times of water temperatures and stuff. You can't beat it because you're mimicking exactly the realism of what live bait's doing. How do you reverse a float and fly bubble? You turn around and you do a drop shot. That's why drop shot was so deadly at the time, because the sinker's on the bottom and you could hover a bait at a certain level. Some of the baits we're doing with Fish Lab, wait till you see our new swim baits. They're going to have suspended animation built into them so they could go down to a certain depth and sit there and hover and
We
act
have a
live.
we
So,
have a couple of comments here.
yeah.
First one from Jeremy May.
Okay.
Jeremy May from Vector Hooks. Fantastic, sharp. Those hooks are too sharp, man. But Jeremy May said, "Hello, folks." Then he says, "I'm a teacher of the game along with a student," and I think he's exactly right there. You have to be both.
Right.
If you give it away, you guarantee that you're going to keep that information.
I just picked
Do
up
it hooks, huh?
I just picked up a bunch of vector hooks for my jig. I'm building some new jigs that nobody knows about for big lake trout, and I just picked up vectors from Do It for the molds. So that's funny that he's on there because I got a few hooks to play with.
Well, Jeremy, I hope you're still here and you got to see that. But Jeremy also said that the floating fly is great in the cold weather months. And just like you said, just the suspended animation, just let that hover. Down on the coast, we like to use popping corks, and those are exactly what you're talking about. They make a lot of noise and a big vibration. And then that thing just sits there. Boom, sits there. Boom, man.
Well, here's a crazy.
I'm having fun here, Bill.
Here's
Thank you.
Crazy thing with like floating fly. It was done with the Nickel brothers came up with it in like the 90s. My dad showed me the floating flies. He was doing it in the 50 for crappie fishing. I took it when I was a kid. So we're talking the 70s, 80s. That's what I grew up in, is doing a fly, a jig, crappie jig. Now, here's the interesting. If you go to my YouTube page, the BBZ TV on YouTube, there's some floating fly stuff in there that will blow your mind, because if you understand the suspended animation on how a bait works, but then you could take braid to your bobber and kite your braid where you could bring your braid up into the wind, and I could fish a bobber away from me on a backside of a tree and then bring it back to the front side of the tree and then let it go fish. I could fish around trees almost three-dimensionally using other elements of your equipment that people forget to use. And there's videos up there I've done for crappie fishing or fishing a human shadow, is being able to stand in one place for a long time in a barren area and have fish come up and hide in your own body shadow. And you fish the bobber into your shadow and catch fish after fish after fish after fish. So yeah, there are so many elements. And like I said, I love the floating fly. Like, it has magic year round. It's not just a wintertime. In the spring, stained water, the fish get up against a tule line in 3 foot of water. They're not on the bottom. They're not on the top. You could do a short tag floating fly with a jig, and you could parallel the tule edge and have that thing right at their nose in the spring when they're spawning and stuff, and catch more fish than guys throwing Senkos. So don't lock yourself into this is only works to this one area. You have to be willing to test it year round, because if they eat a bait this big in the wintertime, they eat it that big in the springtime and the summer and the fall. Suspended animation is part of that. Don't limit yourself. Don't only bring out that floating fly in the wintertime, or you're going to miss out. So my biggest fish I've caught, 18 pounds, was in April on a floating fly. So don't
remember, I told you folks, Mr. Big Bass.
Yeah. I've been fortunate in this, and we talked about this a while ago,
isn't
Jay.
Even that big.
Well, here's the thing. Anybody who says you have to have 10 pounder to have a trophy, we're going to bleep this out. They're full of crap. That is the worst thing to say to any angler in the world. That out. You know what a trophy is? It's if you're starting out or you've been fishing for 50 years, if your biggest bass is 5 pounds, a 6 pounder is a trophy to you, because in Illinois, you might only 6 pounders might be like our 12 pounders. If you're fishing Washington, Oregon, Illinois, yeah. So the interesting thing that wherever you fish is most people still fish for the majority of the fish. They don't understand the power of a bigger bait. Okay. So the power of a bigger bait in areas that you would never comprehend. Illinois, you guys are throwing 3/4 ounce jigs, a big worm, your spinner baits, but guys would be afraid to put on an 8 to 10 inch swim bait because it's not in their realm, but it's in the big fish's realm. So guys that I've talked to for years, I said, go to your favorite lake. Now put on a big bait, fish the same areas in the same techniques dragging a big boot tail swim bait across the bottom. Mid depth, you're throwing big swim baits. Your top water, you're throwing bigger, your musky lures. And I kid you not, Jay, most of them within a year come up to me and go, Bill, I just caught an 8-pounder out of New York. And he goes, I'm not telling anybody. And I go, how? He goes, I put on a big bait finally and I fished the same areas. And he goes, those fish were just not keying into my little jigs and worms. But man, when I put on the big stuff, I saw them. Things started to appear. So that's what Fish Lab, that's what the BBZ, everything else is. What I've done in California works everywhere for all species. You guys got to get out of that rut and open up your mind a little bit. The nice thing is, the clearer the water, though, the faster you're going to learn. You'll see fish that you've never seen before by throwing big baits in clear water. And then you could adjust, get your boat angle, your positioning, fish into the funnel, create the right directional change, and life is going to be different for you fishing. You'll start having those major dreams again on catching your biggest fish. But like I said, 10-pounders, it's the biggest fish you can catch. That's your trophy.
I couldn't agree with you more about that. In as far as, because I'm honest about this. The biggest fish I've ever caught was in northern Illinois, 5 miles from where I lived, and it was a 7-pound.
That's a great fish, 7-pounder.
Just a hair over 7-pound largemouth bass. But when you think about the fishery, that's an absolute monster. There just aren't bass that big up there. There are bass that big if you go a little bit further north, if you go a little bit further south. But there's a band right there where the waters, because I'm close to Chicago, the waters get pounded constantly. Right. 6 million people around Chicago. If even 10% of those people fish, wow.
Well, I'll tell you one thing too is people that don't understand the uphill concept and approach. If you're a smart angler, and I've done this in tournaments, I've done this fun fishing. If you see anglers throw towards the bank and fish big baits or fish baits out to their boats, when you get a daisy chain, when you get a follower and they go, oh, look at that big fish, what happens is those big fish will go down, they'll invert, and they'll hide underneath the shadow of your boat. And they keep throwing at the bank. And you take 6,000 people or 60,000 people that do that, those fish get conditioned to that being pulled off where they want to eat. So if you're the one angler that goes in and puts your boat, you shore walk your boat in a foot of water and throw out where those boats are always at, and then bring a bait uphill into a funnel, you'll catch 90% of those fish. And those guys, they're pulling fish off in one cast. You're creating a bite in a funnel in the second cast after they leave. You pull them right back up to where they want to eat.
I was starting to develop that when I moved away from Illinois, because I had stopped casting into the shore, and I was going parallel to the shore, and I was catching more fish casting parallel to the shore, but I hadn't ventured to start thinking outside the box. Open your mind. Think, what else could I be doing? And I think that's what you're saying here, guys. Open your mind. Think about things other than, looking like this. Don't be myopic. Don't be short-sighted, man. Just think about it. Cast every which way. See how the fish respond. And you have already figured that out. So you've already taken 10 years off their learning curve.
20.
Okay. Because I don't have 20 years left. That's awesome.
Well, yeah, it's called 20 years and 20 minutes. And here's how, being in the fire department and all this stuff for years, is if you want to learn something, you go to somebody that's the best in their field, that's been doing it for 20 years, the gold medalist, the guy who wins all the tournaments, the guy who catch big fish. And you sit down, and in 20 minutes, that person can tell you all the things not to do. So now you don't even have to worry about all the things that don't work, and you only work on the few things that do. You've saved yourself 20 years. And that's my concept. When you look at bait fish, Jay, understanding how they work, you get a swim bait like this. That swim bait just doesn't go from the shore and swim out to open water because it's going to get eaten. You got to understand that this is going to get eaten. He knows he's going to get eaten. So he
No,
wants to come
no.
in towards the shoreline. He wants to hide along the tules and along the grass edge. When you understand how crawdads work, how shad work, currents, like I fish backwards, Jay. Anybody in my boat, and I don't take very many people out in my boat, I fish backwards 90% of the time, which means when I'm fishing and the wind's in my face, I'm throwing behind the big motor because bait fish that live swim up current uphill. Stuff that dies, worms, jigs, crawdads are dying, will roll down a current. So understanding how fish, the bait fish react, man, that'll change everything too. So that's why
Okay,
I
we
love
have
my
a
little
couple of
motor
them.
guy.
We have a comment. We have a comment and a question here. The first comment is from Cajun Rob Welsh, good friend of mine from the great state of Kentucky. He says, Bill is a living legend. Then he says, Bill, what was the first lure you ever designed?
I don't have it in here. But one of the first lures my dad taught me there's a couple guys up at Pyramid back in the day in 1985. And it's in my book. And I know you can get the book over there on Amazon. We put on a PDF, but it's a wood AC jointed type of thing. This is before all the guys were doing it, but it was a jointed wood plug out of a rocking chair leg. And I sat there and I cut it. And way back in the day, we used to put a V cut in the head, 33-degree angle. But we had limited tools. We didn't have the stuff that a lot of people have nowadays with my dad. So we had a coping saw and an anvil. That was it. So I ended up starting to cut them at a 45. But in the book is a picture of my original wood plug that I designed with my dad in 1985. And I've caught probably 80 fish over 10 pounds on that one plug alone.
Jeez.
I've had it for years. I still have it down in the garage. So that was and that was 1985 was my first 10-inch wood trout plug I made when I was a kid. Now, mind you, I grew up tying flies. I built my own rods when I was 6 and 7 years old. I fly tied when I was 6 and 7 for trout. Built my own 9-power salmon rod for ocean fishing. So, yeah, so I've done a lot of stuff, but yeah, for big baits, it was my original wood plug back in 1985. That was a great question.
Wow. Well, thank you, Rob. Thank you, Rob. Wow. That's fantastic. Well, Bill, it's getting to be 42 after the hour. So would you have any shout outs you'd like to do? Any thank yous to any people, companies?
Yeah, the biggest thing is I've been very fortunate. I was a fireman. I just retired for like 34 years. Been doing it before that. I was in a firehouse for like 40 years. I started when I was 13. But yeah, but when it comes to the fishing industry and stuff, I've done a lot. I've fished a lot of big tournaments with Bassmasters back in the day, and I fished some local tournaments, and I keep that competitive juices flowing because that literally you're only as good as the people you're around or you compete against. So that keeps you always thinking. But some of the sponsors, like I've been with Bass Cat since 2000. When we won the first boat, I got a plaque up here, the Bass Cat Invitational at Norfolk. I got my first Bass Cat. They've been just loyal forever, part of that family. Mercury Motor Guide is incredible. Lowrance. And then local guys like Team Davies, Drop Shot. Steve and I designed the first Ventana rattling see-through glass drop shot years ago when we fished Bassmasters at Clear Lake. So he's always been part of the team. BZen Organics, being retired from the fire department and being broken and hurt. And I know Rob Zorn knows that we've talked about this many times. I've been finally introduced into good CBD product. And I tell you what, when you're getting older and your hands cramp up and your back's going out and your knees are going out, BZen has really helped me in the last couple of years with the roll-ons and stuff to help me get through the days because I'm so competitive that it keeps me not inflamed as much. And I'm recovering a lot quicker for, 12 hours on the water. And that's huge. And then you can't not say anything about Akuma Fish Lab and Soft Still. You know, that whole family I got together with a couple years ago. It is so cool to be able to put an idea down and have a group of anglers who know how to fish come together. We all Monday morning quarterback it. We have Mike and everybody goes, let me see what price points are. Let's see how we build this thing that's better than anybody else's on the market. Let's get the best paint jobs out there and getting a price point that anglers like me, because being retired, we don't have an infinite amount of money coming in. I can't afford the original wood plugs that I built. My dad, they used to call them bucket of lures, Jay. My dad's the biggest shout out. My dad would sell a wood plug that made out of a table leg for $300 in the 80s. That was one of the reasons why I came into the industry to start designing the swim baits, is because I couldn't afford $300 baits. Or people, you can't teach people saying first you got to go get a $600 rod and reel combo and a $300 bait. It's too hard for them. So we were able to, luckily I was with companies that we got big baits out there at really good price points. So everybody, especially back east, they're saying, okay, I can handle 20, $25. Let me try it. It works. And then now when they really get in tune, then they can go out to the garage guys who are customs, and they could go buy the $70, $80, $90, $100, and they feel better about it because they know they're going to catch fish. So I want to be on the front end to get anglers out there, the young kids and the adults and everybody else that, you know, can afford a bait to see what I've been doing for 30 years and then be able to go from there, that 20 years in 20 minutes. And like I said, Fish Lab, without, you know, companies like that, it's hard for anglers to keep going. So those are the sponsors. Like I said, Mercury, Bass Cat, Motor Guide, Lowrance, Team Davies, BZen, and then, you know, Lithium Pros and Power Pole. I've been with these guys forever, Jay. So they sure make it a lot easier. So I don't get in trouble as much to the wife because I'm not buying full retail. I get stuff at cost, I get some product, you know, so that helps so much. And I go, you know, you can't do that without it. And then the biggest shout out is to my pops, who passed away about 11 years ago. Without him, I would never be in the industry where I'm at right now. He's taught me so much about fishing and hunting. And I know I left him behind. He always laughed. I left him behind when I turned about 8 years old. You'll see in the book, when I caught my first 8-pounder, he's like, I barely caught a fish that. He fished his whole life. And to think, Dad and I always talked about it. He passed away, you know, when I stopped kind of counting, but I had 500 fish over 10 pounds by about 2005 when we wrote the book. And I just quit counting because, you know, people, like I said, you don't want to throw those numbers out there with that size, because that deters a lot of people, and you want to keep that dream alive. So whatever your big fish is, your next goal, your trophy is something a little bigger, and that's going to keep fishing alive for everybody in the industry.
You know, the way I look at that is any fish 4 pounds plus is a blessing to me.
I'm waiting for my 4-pound crappie.
Yeah, Mississippi.
Is that where I need to go?
There's a triangle there: Grenada, Sardis, Enid. Just look at. They have to be 12 inches before you can keep them, and just do some research on Grenada.
Awesome.
Grenada. I don't know how to pronounce that word, but anyways,
it's a lake that has big crappie.
It's famous for big crappies. It's a huge impoundment. It's in Mississippi. It has lots of crappie guides there who can show you where they're at, because they're, you know, forward-facing sonar has changed the face of crappie fishing forever. But you know, it's still, what I'd like to do is just go out there and wade around in the standing timber and catch fish that way. That's just so. That's even closer to them than kayak fishing is. That just sounds like fun to me.
Yeah, I know.
I grew up waiting for smallmouth bass, you know, in smallmouth ponds or smallmouth streams in northern Illinois. Most of them were this big, but you know, to a 10-year-old boy, I caught a smallmouth bass by myself.
Yeah. I was really fortunate fishing with Al Linder on a couple of his shows and with Roland Martin. But Al and we were fishing down here in California. It's on my YouTube channel. I caught fish up to 10 pounds on basically you'd be calling it like a Ned rig. I was doing this, I don't know, for 30 years, but I was catching on light line, and then we ran into one section where we found crappie, Jay, and Al and I both lit up like little kids, and we stood up on the back of the boat and we were flipping in these. There's a show up there that we were doing crappie fishing. It was the funnest thing ever. So you figure, it's not always about big bass, big crappie, big carp, catfish, anything that, the tug is the drug, I guess they would say. So yeah, it's been fun.
That's why I call my show Let's Talk Fishing, so I can talk about any kind of fish. I do it all. I guess tuna, with the way my body's broken down, I couldn't catch a tuna, but a 20-pound redfish, a 2-pound crappie, I mean, imagine a 20-pound redfish catching that on bass tackle. It's so much fun.
And it goes back into the BBZ concepts, Jay. Crappie, bass, redfish, snooks, stripers, they are all predators within their own realm. The baits that you use, big or small, are tools that you understand the top, middle, bottom. How does it pendulum through the water? Crappie like a pendulum up. Bass like directional changes into funnels. So when you start understanding, if you want to become a really, really good fisherman, go fish for carp, because carp are tough to catch, man. When you understand that the stealthiness of a carp and how minute you have to do stuff and how light-lipped the rubber lips are to even hook them, when you do that or understand where the crappie are and catch crappie, then you're better off catching bass. When you understand how sneaky the carp are, then when you're sight fishing and you're stealth mode, no wind, high sun, bluebirds guys, post frontal, and the bass are tough, you could go to 4-pound test line and still catch bass. Like every fish has something to teach you if you're a good student and you take that to heart and you sit down, you write about it, you think about it, you look at it and you go, okay, I could put this into any category. I've never caught a redfish. You put me around redfish, I'm going to catch the hell out of a redfish. I'm going to catch big ones, but I've never caught one yet, but they're all the same.
That is so funny you said that about carp, because I had a lot of time when I was between my senior year of high school and freshman year of college. So I went down to this river and I saw the carp, and I was using big hooks, and then I started using small hooks and just putting a single kernel of corn on there, canned corn. And boy, guys would come down there. You can't catch a 20-pound fish on a little bitty. I grew up catching steelhead on little bitty. I mean, steelhead are a heck of a lot more hard. Steelhead are very difficult to catch.
Yeah.
They like little bitty things, and man, I agree with everything you said. This has been so fun talking to you.
Awesome. And I'm always here for anybody. Could reach out to me at bill@thebbz.com. Like I said, check out Fish Lab. We got some new lures, new baits coming for ICAST next year, new colors, new sizes. And I got a couple things up my sleeve right after ICAST. Yeah, some cool stuff. So you guys are always welcome to reach out to me, and I'll help anybody I can, especially the youth.
Well, Bill, that's about all the time I have for this evening. Thank you so much. I really enjoyed this. I know the people who are here enjoyed it. We had a few comments tonight. Brad Yole, thank you for commenting, especially you. Bassin Magazine still is alive, guys. Please go to bassinonline.com. You again, Fish Lab Tackle. Guys, check out fishlabtackle.com. See what Bill has available. The cost effective, I can't believe, high quality lures, low cost. Are we really in 2023?
Only at Fish Lab. Awesome. And like I said, Jay, you guys ever want to talk again, just reach out to me and I'll come over and help you guys. We'll get into some more depth on fishing. And after you read the book, you can take some notes.
Yes, I will read that book. I'm going to be on the field with that guy all week next week, so he's going to help me out. He's going to help me out to download that. Guys, thank you so much for tuning in to Let's Talk Fishing video podcast. You have something else you want to say?
Yeah, Jay, are you going to have this? I know this is live. Are you going to have this recorded? Because what I'll do is I'll post it back up on my website when it's up and ready for other anglers that didn't have time to check in. So do you do that?
Give me 2 minutes After we get off here, I will send you a link to where it's going to be stored on Facebook. And if you want, I can even send you an MP4. I can.
Awesome.
There's all kinds of different things I can do for that. So yes, I will have that available for you. Please stick around for 2 minutes after the show. And with that, guys, you know what? It's Thursday night. Make your plans. Go fishing this weekend. You only get to do this once. And like we talked about, man, everything that Bill told you, it's not going to work unless you get out there on the water.
Right.
It's just, just like I said, man, you can't learn anything sitting here. I know I'm a podcaster, but you're not going to learn anything unless you're going to apply what we've taught you.
There you go.
So anyways, I'm going to end the podcast with that. Bill, please stick around.
You got it. Thanks, everybody, for joining us, and we'll catch you out on the water.